Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Stonecrest. This is Malika Wells, president of the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition, welcoming you to another monthly Stonecrest Citizens Coalition community engagement meeting. Thank you all for joining us on this evening. As always, we want to encourage you to stay muted while we are talking. If you have questions or comments, please drop them into the chat. We are excited about the guests we have with us this evening. And once we get into the conversational part of this evening, we'll be able to take your questions and comments at that time. So a little bit of background, like we like to do, about the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition. SCC has a history of grassroots organizing and advocacy and is guided by Stonecrest residents committed to community engagement, dialogue and deliberation, transparency and efficacy. It's our goal to do transformative, impactful work informed by the community and by sound data gathering and analysis that supports what the community wants and needs, not just for the city's sake, but also for the benefit of everyone who lives, works, and visits here. Our vision is to see Stonecrest united under the concept of Ujamaa, which is collective work and responsibility, where the city government cooperates with its citizens to establish and maintain a government that is ethical, transparent, and accountable, and where the citizens of Stonecrest are engaged collectively to improve our quality of life as expressed in the city's pillars of live, work, play, shop, educate, and worship. It's our mission to improve the quality of life and prosperity for Stonecrest residents, business owners, and other stakeholders through education, advocacy, and action. With that in mind, our values, what we value as an organization, are love, kindness, faith, family, human dignity, collaboration, advocacy and activism, data-driven practices, accountability, community, honesty and ethics, and transparency. If you want to learn more about the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition, and of course we encourage you to do so, you can visit us online at stonecrestcitizens.org, stonecrestcitizens.org. If you're interested in joining the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition, you'll find that we have a join page on that website, and you may also email us at info@stonecrestcitizens.org. Thank you guys for listening to me, and I'm going to turn this meeting back over to Andrew Wells, and let's get into it.
Well, let's do that. Thank you so much for that introduction and sharing the information about the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition, Malika. Thank you. Want to welcome everyone who is coming on. Thank you so much for being a part of this community engagement meeting. Without further ado, we are going to be having a conversation this evening with Mr. Robert Scott. And before I bring him on with a couple of questions that I have, just want to take a moment and not embarrass him too much, but talk a little bit about his bio and experience. Mr. Scott is a veteran of commercial real estate. I think he's only been at this about 40 years. So sounds like he's just getting started here, but about 40 years in real estate, 30 of that spent with the General Services Administration in various design build functions. Hopefully he'll talk about some of his major credits while he was developing in that space and leasing in that space. Also one of the founding board members of the T. Dallas Smith and Company commercial real estate company here in Metro Atlanta. And he's been doing that since 2013. But he also wanted to make sure that I told you all he is actively trying to retire. So he is very much looking to turn towards his wonderful grandchildren and children as well, and get more engaged in that part of his life. So he is in active retirement, but he is here at the disposal of the community to help talk about community development. And so I've got a couple of questions for him. And then of course, as you have questions, please drop those questions in the chat and I'll read them out in order of the chat. If follow-up is necessary verbally, then just, raise your hand and we'll move from there with regard to that. Without further ado, Mr. Scott, if you would come off mute and introduce yourself.
Good evening, and thanks for having me. My name is Robert Scott, as Andrew has mentioned to you. I've been in commercial real estate for about 40 years. I've been licensed in real estate probably before some of you were born in 1977. So I'm well familiar with real estate. By no means am I an expert, know-it-all. I think I have a fairly good knowledge, working knowledge of what we need to do and how we need to do and how to help our clients in accomplishing whatever goals they are trying to accomplish. I don't know how much in depth Andrew wants me to go into this, but I've served for GSA in the senior capacity of management and the senior contracting officer for Region 4, the 8 southeastern states, and doing a variety of different projects all the way. Most of you are not on Social Security, but one of a major accomplishments was to develop, design, to manage, oversee, and contract for a design build of the new Birmingham Payment Center, is where most Social Security checks come from, as well as, and that was approximately 1.4 million square feet. Also, as part of the development of the Sam Nunn Federal Center downtown, which is about 1.5 million square feet. I've done Homeland Security, FBI, Secret Service in all 8 states. I'm on an advisory board in DC for development for the federal community, as well as my time with T. Dallas Smith and Company. We've done a lot of work for governmental agencies. We've done it for state, city, as well as federal government. So that's it in a nutshell. We kind of worked up something some time ago, and we can estimate that I've probably acquired over 20 or 30 million square feet of space throughout my career. So is that good, Andrew, in a nutshell?
Well done. Nutshell is full. So as I mentioned earlier, I will go ahead and get started with a couple of questions that I had. And then as you guys have questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll make sure that we get into them. Okay. All right. First question up is, in your opinion, Mr. Scott, what is responsible community development, in particular when you're talking about commercial or like a large residential? What's responsible community development?
And let me qualify that by saying, by no means am I the expert of all these area disciplines, but some key factors in that. And let me begin by saying community involvement is going to be your first response. There was a moratorium set out in DeKalb County and Stonecrest for, let's say, Dollar Trees and dollar stores and Dollar Generals. That's an example of too much of one thing and not enough of another. And the reason I say community development is because from this, you need subcommittees, you need leaders that is willing to go down to the zoning boards, that's willing to go to the community meetings when they're talking about development in your community, in this case, our community. In addition to that, we need to have an area map of our whole Stonecrest or DeKalb County community. And the reason why we need to have a map, because we need to also know what's there. where the residential areas, where the commercial areas, and how closely do they overlap, or how closely are they together. In addition to that, we need the zoning overlay. We need the zoning overlay so that we can know what areas are currently zoned commercial, light industrial, or retail, or residential. And the reason why that is so important is because if you are zone commercial and I began my project of I want to put up a, an adult entertainment center, or some type of truck stop, which is becoming very prevalent on 124. And we can see, okay, it's on that. But what should we do as a community? Well, first of all, we should be aware when those applications are coming in our communities, applying for construction permits. And we would know what type of institution or what type of business that they're planning to develop. Okay, because we don't want a truck stop. I can recall even in our subdivision here several years ago, the Quick Trip out on Pranola was going to be a truck stop. And some advocates, community advocates, came through the community and said, oh, we don't want this on Panola. Even though it's not close, we still don't want that truck traffic on Panola. And they solicited from all the residents here and asked for $100, $150 to hire an attorney to help us fight that. Well, this is what we need to do. We have to be involved early. We have to know when it's coming. I know I'm in some disputes over property off of 124 right now with truck stops being too close to residential areas. Well, these people saying, well, we have the right to build. But what I told the commissioners, yes, they may have a right to build, but what does EPA say? How is that going to affect the environment? So that means we need to check of whatever type of business, how is it going to affect our environment, the infrastructure, how is it going to affect the streets? You know, is the infrastructure large enough to support large trucks or a large volume of traffic? Suppose we had on Panola a Amazon warehouse. Can it support another 500 cars a day on that on Panola Road or some of the other roads? That's why we need to have people looking up front,
And
asking the questions.
And when you say up front, and you mentioned the application phase, because usually the community is not made aware, if they're going to be made aware, until there's like a scheduled hearing or a meeting. So how do we check in at the application phase? Is that something we just have to discipline ourselves to do daily? Like, how do we do that part?
Well, great question, Andrew. One of the key factors is we have to have monitors. And the monitors, most of all, DeKalb County is online right now, and we could search, you know, on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, whatever, what is being applied for. I'm not sure if Stonecrest has that, but I at one time they were talking about having that. So the other is make sure that our elected officials for whatever district or zone that we're in, that they are making us aware of what's going on in their prospective district. They should know, because that when they apply for a building permit, that should be being filtered through our commissioners or our council person at the same time, so that they are aware, and they need to have a direct link to the community organizations, you know, to tell us what exactly is going on, or is being proposed in our communities.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And then you guys passed the hat around to hire an attorney to fight the truck stop. What kind of attorney was it? And do you remember about how much that attorney cost y'all?
That was several years ago. And, our subdivision is kind of off the beaten path of Panola Road, but I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 or better. It was a real estate attorney. And it's, most businesses don't want bad press.
Yeah.
So it was just bad press. I mean, Quick Trip had the right to put whatever they wanted to at that location, and we fought it. But we fought it because of the adverse effect it would have on this community. And I'm not just saying the community of people of color. I'm talking about a community at whole. And when you talk about being responsible community development, we need to know what we want in our communities, what we need in our communities, and those things that we don't want in our communities. Even though the property owners have the rights to do this, it doesn't mean that they can do it without any interference or without any exceptions, to the rules. And in a lot of cases, they will back off or modify their original design or plan for that development.
Thank you so much for that. Next question for you is, what types of municipal incentives, what types of city incentives work best to inspire the kind of development we want to see? The stuff we might consider responsible. What types of incentives might work that a city could provide? What might work to attract what we want to see?
Well, Andrew, in answering that, I would have to kind of take a step back first, and say, in any new development, anything new coming to your communities, the communities have to be ready. And one of the things that major industries or businesses look at, and I know you're talking about maybe mom and pops or small businesses, but all businesses look at the crime rates in your areas. What is the demographics in your area? What will this community support the business that I'm trying to open up? Because no business want to fail. Now, if we want to put a industrial warehouse, that's something different than putting a Publix on Turner Hill at Stonecrest. You see, demographics is going to make a difference in that crime rate. It's going to make a difference, loitering, you name it. So the incentives has got to say, first, begin with us. We're going to have to try to work to clean up our own area. And in doing that cleanup, we may entice, because the Business Chronicle several years ago had an article about South DeKalb County. And they indicated that South DeKalb County was one of the richest counties in Georgia per capita. Now, the word per capita we have to pay a lot of attention to, because that means the number of people in a certain, let's say in a square mile.
Mm-hmm.
So in Buckhead, you may have one mansion with 4 people on an acre of land, where in DeKalb County, you may have 10 people on an acre of land. So that's the per capita. But when you look at South DeKalb, we have a good medium income, for this, that we could probably support another major mall like Lenox right here, or any high-end department stores, definitely more better restaurants. But the attraction for those businesses are not there, or the fear is there,
Mhm. Mhm.
to come here.
Thank you
And
for
then we have to treat our own people right. So when you talk about the incentive, that's going to begin the process, the steps that you're going through, and the incentives. And we have to be really careful about the incentives. We have to get those experts there. And the first thing they're going to say is tax credits. Now, we can give all the tax credits in the world, and we will have a local government that is deficient in the income revenue to support our city or our county. So it's a mixture of incentives. Well, that's the biggest thing that's going, incentives right now for most. The film industry, the reason they are here in Georgia is because of the incentives the state gave them. So that's probably your biggest motivator for people to move to or to open up businesses in Stonecrest. And I'm assuming we're only talking about Stonecrest.
Yes, we are only talking about Stonecrest, at least
Okay.
in this conversation, but it's good to know that simply giving the incentives is not enough. We need to be thoughtful about what happens on the back end of those incentives, and have we analyzed what we're going to get in return?
Absolutely. The cause and effect of it.
Right. Is that the same case when you talk about, I guess a tax abatement is just a type of incentive. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay.
I've served on the Economic Development Board for DeKalb Chamber and DeKalb County, and that's exactly what they did.
Gotcha.
They were looking at what incentives, in some cases you could be very creative, where the city could acquire the land, lease it back out to a developer. The developer has a long-term lease and develop the land at a low, let's say, leasing fee or rental rate. And they build the building, and after 20 or 30 years, they own the building.
Got it.
I mean, the federal government did that. Same thing. We didn't want to go to Congress, so we found a new way of creating new properties and new developments in cities.
That's great. With regard to the community involvement, when we're talking about ordinances, are you familiar at all with ordinances that require developers to come and meet with community organizations and groups? Not suggest, but require. Are you familiar with that at all? And then if you are, how do we get there?
Well, it's going to get there through local policies, local laws, and local policies where the city of Stonecrest have to adopt certain ordinances that all businesses that are 10,000 square feet or greater, that they would have to require a community meeting or community input. And you can classify those in various different categories. One is being by square footage, one is being by the type of business. You can be very creative in that, but it's going to come from the local government, the ones who's issuing building permits, and who's going to allow some local inputs from the local, or not from the local, from the community groups to either be present in those meetings or to serve as a non-voting member or on those committees.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about us getting into local policy, are you saying that, well, not are you saying, what do you think about community groups or members even drafting legislation? Have you ever heard of that? Like, you know, we're hiring someone, but have you ever heard of us drafting and submitting legislation to local policy makers to consider?
Absolutely. You can, we as a group could create a draft, a proposal, and submit it to our council person or our commissioner and ask them to develop it further and ask them to submit it.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, that would be the lay term of getting something through. And I have to, at this point, kind of reiterate again that that's where we have to hold our local officials accountable.
Yes.
To communicate with us. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because nothing is carte blanche.
That's right. But it feels that way because you hear the terms use by right? You leave us alone or we'll sue you. And so you hear these terms, and it's good to know there are still legs to stand on, whether it's bad press, potential environmental concerns. It's good to know there are still things there. I'm going to pause on my questions, Mr. Scott. We've got we've got a comment and then we've got a question in the chat that I wanted to make sure that I read out loud for us. Dave put in the chat that I have thought about doing a weekly open records request to the city, asking for a copy of the first page of each application received during the previous week. Application types, including rezoning, SLUPs, demo permits, and others. If you can add in on some others, that is the kind of action that it takes. But that stuff is exhausting. So it'd be nice to have some help doing that with Dave with that. But that's a wonderful suggestion. And then Dana Holmes has a question for you. How can the city help an organization easily acquire blighted properties, in particular commercial, acquire blighted properties to fix them up or repurpose them?
Well, that's going to be more of a legal question, but it is possible. Okay. You may have to create a capital committee within the city that they can, acquire those. But along with that, they would have to have the governing rules or ordinances that says those type of properties the city can secure or buy. Okay. And in doing that, it's kind of a tug of war with the owners who have left the project, property undeveloped or blotted out, or there is a property owner that may want to sell and not do any type of improvement, sell it to the city, and then the city finds a developer to develop it to a use that the city desires in that location.
Are we equipped that way right now in Stonecrest, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't think so. I believe you do have or had a capital group, and I forget what it's called, that could acquire properties or do development almost as a private entity, quasi-government, but I'm not sure if they have it now.
Got it. Thank you for that. Got another question in the chat. What has the city done, to your knowledge, recently regarding community development that you've been excited about, and why?
Great question. I think COVID has changed a lot of the way we communicate and and how much information we get. So I can't really think of anything recently in the last year or two that we've really done in Stonecrest that really ignited my interest, to a point where I really wanted to get back involved. But there may be, I'm not saying it's not, I can't get the Champion and the other newspapers by going by and just picking up one. I have to read it online now. So
Understood. Thank you for that
okay.
response. I also have another question in here from Miss Alexandria Bird. She writes, even with a great location and low crime rate, do you feel that big businesses would find value in investing in predominantly Black and/or African-American cities? I am wondering how Stonecrest can overcome the residuals and potential and ongoing practices of racism in real estate.
Well, great question. One in particular is, let's remember, land is limited. That we're not developing more land. So eventually, when they go all north and east and west, when that land runs out, they're going to have to come back someplace. And if we have that land available, and we have the proper zoning and ordinances in place, that we become more attractive to them. In a lot of cases, in rural and African American areas, land cost is much less than in other areas. So that's part of the overall development scheme that we should be trying to develop to improve everything, which drives up the cost of residential as well as the commercial development. Home Depot, they developed something in a pretty much predominantly area off 124. They came. I understand there are a couple of other industries are looking in the area off of 124. So, but we just don't want to make it so industrialist. We want to have a good mix, and we want to make it that the infrastructure is capable of supporting whatever industries that we're putting in our area. So that's why we need to come up with that overlay of, okay, we want this area to stay all residential. We want this area, it's commercial, zone commercial now, but we don't feel like that is responsible development because it's too close to the residential. So, that's where we got to get these zoning laws changed. I understand that the zoning map was designed almost 50 years ago for DeKalb County. So you can only imagine 50 years ago and today, it is definitely, outdated.
Yeah. And with that being said, we talk a lot about zoning and zoning changes. We also talk a lot about changes to our master plan, our master development plan. Is there too much or a too often to be looking at that to revise it, in your opinion? Or, as often as we need to look at it, we need to be looking at it, and as often as we need to revise it, we need to revise it? Or is there a too much?
There is not a too much. And if for that example of your master plan, they are planning a master plan right now because of the last master plan and zoning plan that was published. Most of that was published over 50 years ago. So we need more current plans and conducive to our community. I mean, if you look at 124 and you look at on the other side of Turner Hill off of 124, you have one side belongs to Stonecrest, the other side belongs to DeKalb County. that they putting truck stops there. So is that the type of development we want? So close. I mean, Turner Hill could support the trucks, but how hard is that going to be for you to commute to the mall or to City Hall or other, stores or merchants within that area?
Gotcha. I see one more. Thank you for that, by the way. I see one more question here from Alexandria Bird again. How important would it be for Stonecrest to have its own community improvement district? How important would that be? And I'll add on to that. What should it focus on, in your opinion?
Well, now repeat that question.
Yeah. How important would it be for Stonecrest to have its own community improvement district? And then I was just saying, what should it focus on?
Well, I agree. I think it should have it, their own community development or community district, business district. But I think in order to have that, we need to have an area that we identify as what we want to call downtown Stonecrest. So that would be, one of the same. But that area, you want to focus on a downtown area. If it's a Mall Parkway, if it's whatever, it probably wouldn't be Turner Hill, but you could have that. So now all the businesses that's going to be there are going to be businesses mainly, and they're going to probably be small businesses. And that's going to be your downtown. That's going to be your work, play, live, entertainment district. Everything is going to be in that general area. So that again goes back to the community map. Our community of Stonecrest, what we want to identify as that business district, what we want to identify as that City Hall row, or what we want to call downtown Stonecrest.
Thank you so much for that. Dave, thank you so much for being patient. I'm gonna have you unmute yourself in just a second to pose your question or comment. Mr. Scott, we've got him. He's trying to retire, but he's not quite retired yet. So he does have a board meeting that he's got to get to in about 20 or so minutes. So we've got him for another 20 minutes. So make sure you get your comments in and questions as you have them. But Dave, please, thank you so much for waiting patiently. Come on out.
Sure. First, let me say that retirement is the best job you will ever have. I'm enjoying the heck out of it. Other than that, three questions. When you talk about a zoning overlay, would that be the equivalent of the future land use map that's in the comprehensive plan?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what I was speaking about.
Okay, well, we have that for better or worse, and that's a subject. When you talked about a quasi-governmental agency that could buy land, work with developers, etc., would that typically be something like the Stonecrest Development Authority?
It could be,
okay,
as long as your authority, as long as the charter gives you that authority.
The charter does, and they exist, and they are basically dead, down to 3 members, no bank account, no lawyer, and all they've done are deals that might be characterized as sweetheart deals with a single developer.
Okay.
Third question was on open records request for applications. The key ones that I'm thinking of are an application for rezoning, for a special land use permit, for demolition, and for there was a fourth one, but I was going to ask you what others. a land disturbance permit. What others are key to get an early warning on?
Well, anything that's large. So if you have a development that it may encompass 10 or better acres, 10 or greater acres of land. If you have one that's going to talk about multifamily, you make sure that you have your input in that, because there's a big push about affordable, housing. And right now, I think the goal is trying to get like the 16th Street or Punt City Market, the live, play, and everything else in one community. So anything that's going to be a large development, you want to always focus on that to really see what they're talking about doing, because some of that may have an adverse effect on the community.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great questions, great follow-up comments as well. Mr. Scott, we are literally in the midst of facing unwanted development off of I-20. Truck stops, gravel parking lots, harmful emissions, you name it. I want you to kind of go back to your QT story because it's relevant right now. What are the first 3 things we as community members should be doing? Because of course, in this situation, many of these are use by right, and there aren't the typical things that give you leverage, like needs to rezone and stuff like that. So what are some of the things first 3 things we should do as community members to oppose this?
Well, you first need to find out what type of development is planned and get a copy of their request for permit, so you can find out the infrastructure of what they're proposing. Because, sometimes saying, well, I'm going to do an apartment complex doesn't necessarily tell us the story that they're planning to put 50 units out there, because they may plan to put 50 units plus another 30 units of storage, warehouse space. So we need to find out their application, what it entails, whether they have a proposed plan, schematics, and look into that and think about it. And I know this is a lot of work for one person and all. So it may be that we have to break up into subcommittees to kind of, look at that, because you're not only looking at Stonecrest, you're also looking at DeKalb County. Because
would that help us if we were to look at partnerships with the county or neighboring communities?
Oh, absolutely. Because, if there's going to be a fight, you need more people. And because of all these hearings, let me qualify what I'm saying. I'm saying because we may disagree with that type of development. Because again, if you go out Turner Hill, you cross over I-20, and then you start to get into DeKalb County. On one side might be Stonecrest, the other side might be DeKalb County, unincorporated DeKalb at that.
Got it.
So you're gonna look at development applications for Stonecrest. You can also look at applications of nearby land outside of Stonecrest and what kind of development they are proposing. So it could be Rockdale County. It could be with DeKalb on one side, Rockdale's on the other, and it's probably we may have to go into even Henry County to a certain extent.
Okay. Thank you so much. Malika, it looks like you have your hand raised. Did you want to come on camera and, I mean, not camera on camera, but come off mute and pose your question or comment?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Scott, for joining us this evening. So helpful what you're sharing. I had a question about accessibility. And when I say accessibility, I mean, sometimes, like, all community members are not principals and EVPs retired from T. Dallas Smith commercial, real estate development brokers. So every community member who might want to have input into these processes, into what happens here, may not know how to, the language, the lingo, the terminology, the jargon, may not have access to that to say those things. How can communities find allies among the experts that we talked about who can partner with communities to review things like a city's charter, to review things like a city's comprehensive plan, their zoning plan, and all of those kind of things, and give input and help community members understand where they might need to suggest to elected officials to make changes for improvements to increase equity and sustainability in their development practices. I hope I phrased that well.
You did. And thank you for asking that, because one of our first steps in asking for help is our own communities. We have so many professionals in our very own communities, our next door neighbors, our neighbors down the street. One of the disadvantages we have now is that we don't know our neighbors and we don't know what they do. We have doctors and we have lawyers in our own communities that we need to ask them, hey, can you give us some help? Can you give us some pro bono work? So they can help interpret. They may be too busy to do a lot, but they can help us and put us on the right course of action that we need to take, and may even give us a lot of suggestions on some things to do. I, recently got reacquainted with one of my neighbors, and come to find out he was a engineer. And hey, what better source of having an engineer for certain types of questions? And your neighbors, they are, I don't wear titles, or I try not to, and it's that people look at me, and when you say real estate, people come to me all the time and says, I got a house for sale. Well, I really, other than my private inventory of assets, I deal primarily with commercial, even though I know a lot about residential, but we stereotype because of title. Real estate is a vast, large area of several different occupations. And we just need to get better acquainted with our neighbors so that we know what they do and who we need to pinpoint. And they may not always volunteer, but we can get them involved. And I say that is because I see, and even some of the other organizations that I'm a member, we are reactive. We're not proactive. And this is where we need to be proactive, especially if we want to have a thriving city in DeKalb County.
Well, I know this is wonderful. I know we got you for about 8-9 more minutes, so I want to get one more question from the chat. My wife has an ear for who wants to volunteer. She said this sounds like some voluntelling. We got to go and tell folks they are drafted in this army.
Yeah.
But the question comes from Dana Holmes, and she says, what area do you think would be more attractive for a downtown Stonecrest? So we had asked you, where would downtown Stonecrest be?
Well, I've given it a lot of thought, but I kind of think, I used to think that the Automobile Alley was the prime location, and it still could be, you know. Um, you actually only have one side of the street now, where before you mainly had both sides of the street. And, we need those automobile dealerships. We need that revenue and the tax base. But also on the other side, there's a whole area, because you want it on a main thoroughfare. It just don't have to be a side street. It needs to be some connecting off a main thoroughfare. So you have the area that's over by the furniture store and the new Honda dealership. There's still a lot of land there, all the way down to Turner Hill, and behind those buildings as well, up to the hotel. So that could be a business district. Even going the other way is less land, but behind the old Sam's building and over where City Hall is now, there is still some land there, but that's a little off the beaten path. We want foot traffic, and we want, the automobile traffic. You want to be visual, you want to be able to see what's going on and invite other people to come in.
Absolutely, absolutely. I see some agreement in there for that. Me too. Yeah, and just following up on that particular question, and I know you got to run, but just following up on that question, if we were talking about that area, what sorts of things do we need to add infrastructure wise, or is everything there? I mean, is it walkable enough? Is it, do we need to add, anything for scenery? Is there anything, else that we would need to add over there before we were able to, develop that into downtown?
Well, no, I mean, other than the proper infrastructure, so it's probably going to be mainly strip centers, or because the land cost is just so much for independent buildings. Nice strip centers, which could entice maybe restaurants being held in the lower levels, or and basically all the other infrastructures are already in place. Utilities already underground, so it's just be connecting. But you have to put that overlay onto that master plan right now, before you put that storage facility on that strip, or before, well, I wouldn't say you want to stop the automobile dealers from coming, because that might be, one of our biggest source of revenues. But right around the corner from there, off of behind the new Honda dealership, there's a lot of land right there. It's connected to the main street. We could put directional signage to make sure we invite people to come down there. Hotels are down there. Everything is already in place. We clean up the area. We increase patrols by DeKalb County, and to make it safe for people to walk. We put different things that maybe attracts families to come to do things and to participate. So, but you have to designate that area as a downtown business district, or something, so that you want to restrict what you put into that area. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do when you don't own the land. So
right. Thank you for that. Got a question here from Alex Bird, and I'm looking at the time. This probably really is the last one here, but she asks, do you think that the new Black Wall Street helped or hurt the attractiveness of Stonecrest to larger businesses? Did it help or hurt?
Well, for me to say that, I really don't know. We live in a different time today. Stigmatisms was always in place. If when you say Black this or Black that, it automatically, in some cases, turn off people, okay? But I do believe, and I know for certain that certain businesses are all motivated by revenue. So businesses could see where the revenue is there, that might attract them to come. That's where we're going to have to promote our demographics in many ways to attract people to come. If I put up a Nike Center right there on the same street, is that Mall Parkway? I believe it is. Mm-hmm. If I put a Nike Center on Mall Parkway, I guarantee I'm gonna sell so many tennis shoes. Because, and they're gonna be at $300 a watt. Mm-hmm. But we have to, put all those, but we can't think about one set of demographic groups. We have to think about our baby boomers, or we have to think about our millenniums. We have to think about Gen X's. We have to think about a variety of different people, because in order for our communities to survive, we have to have all of these groups working together and generating the type of income necessary to support whatever businesses we're trying to put in place. And I'm not talking about a Popeye's fried chicken. I'm not talking about Church's chicken or what's the footlong places and all that. We're talking about nice dining institutions that we can go to, sit down with our family and feel safe and feel like our car is not going to be vandalized or broken into in the parking lot. And if I just want to walk around to the mall, I can do that.
Mr. Scott, we have thoroughly enjoyed you. I, for one, have thoroughly enjoyed you. It is 8 o'clock, and I know we are supposed to release you at this point. Dave has had his hand up. Do you have time for one more? Is that all right?
I do, and I'm going to say that I take his question, and if for some reason we're winding down on my other business meeting, I jump back on the call, and I have you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dave, go ahead and unmute.
First, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Scott. Second, in terms of a city center, what about the land on Lithonia Industrial that is south of 20, untouched land, a lot of it, down to Woodrow? Are you familiar with that?
Yes. And some of that land is owned by New Birth.
Yes.
Okay. And I know New Birth had several projects on the shelf some time ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're still on the shelf about a new community center, a business little area for small businesses. And that's where you're going to have to invite these churches in. And that, in my opinion only, and I don't mean to offend anyone, that may not be the best business district for downtown. Now, that could be a business district, of course. But remember, whatever you put there, you have residential areas all surrounds that whole area. So it has to be appropriate for that area.
That's true. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, yes, we're going to go ahead and let Mr. Scott go. We will be on for a few more minutes after that. So Mr. Scott, if you want to check back in with the fun group after you've done your business stuff, please feel free to do so.
Okay, and I want to say again, thanks for having me. I hopefully I've shared some information that was helpful and that we can move forward. I do plan on joining your group. Let me put, I looked into that. So your dues might break me, but again, thanks for having me. You know, feel free to reach out to me, or, you know, Andrew, I'd be glad to help you answer any questions that may come up after I drop off. But thanks again, and I hope all of you have a great evening and be blessed.
Thank you so much. You do the same. And thank you for the vote of confidence with the pending membership.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you all. Good night.
Take care now.
Hey, Andrew, could I mention two things?
Yeah, go for it.
Number one, Malika mentioned that the DeKalb County Comprehensive Plan revision is underway, and I think they've got a pretty solid draft. They tried to get permission from the council today to send it either to the state or the ARC, and the commission, rather, not council, and they pushed back on that, so there's still some time. I hope somebody is looking at the changes to the DeKalb Comp Plan for the parcels and neighborhoods and areas that are right on our borders, because those could impact us a lot. And I just want to put that out there for somebody to be voluntold by Malika.
It's coming.
Right. It's coming. And the point you raise is vital and critical. And it lays in with what Mr. Scott just said, right? It was like, we have to pay attention to contiguous development, even that stuff outside of this line we call Stonecrest, because it's going to be impactful. So yeah, Malika, I'm sure your mind has been working, and Dave just lit the spark, but you were probably already there. So yeah, Dave, that's awesome to bring that stuff out. We've got to be on time with this, and it's a lot of work, but it's worth it if we're ahead of the curve.
And the other thing to mention is that all of the vacant land, or virtually all, between the mall down to Evans Mill on both sides, is property of the Stonecrest Development Authority that is under long-term lease to the Allen Family Enterprises for development in extraordinarily unspecified ways.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that could be said there that probably this is not the time.
It will be. Yeah, but it's coming.
Yeah. It's imperative for citizens to try to influence the development authority, if it still really exists, to try to rework their contracts with Mr. Allen to require him to do things. Right now it says nothing more than an entertainment center and a hotel, and then maybe a convention center that the city would end up owning.
Right.
But there's just nothing going on at this point, and it's a very, very. I know some experts who've looked at that and said they gave him a free ride, which is their privilege, and I wish they hadn't.
Yeah, and I'm continuing to be optimistic about the rebirth of that development authority with more direct influence from the city. I know that other cities have development authorities that, aren't as connected, but I think we need the oversight. And I think if the city is involved, we as citizens and citizen-led organizations have more influence there than if it was just a private LLC, kind of in the way it's constructed now. So
Yeah.
we need it to be that way so that we can have more influence. Maybe other cities can do without it, but we can't.
I feel at a minimum, they need to be held to the comprehensive plan and to the goals of the city as specified in the plan, and not do anything that is outside of that. They have to work with the city. I mean, it's ridiculous to do anything else.
Anybody else have, no, Dave, that's a conversation we could probably have for another hour, but I do want to give someone an opportunity to respond if they have any feedback on what they heard Mr. Scott say. Are they also any feedback or thoughts, anything that anybody would want to share as well? But Dave, you're preaching to the choir there.
I
Okay,
enjoyed.
Malika, did you have any? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dana.
I enjoyed the meeting with Mr. Scott. I thought it was very informative and very necessary, especially for what we're trying to do as an organization. In our great concerns with the city and what our city looks like, and the development aspect around that. I will chime in that when he spoke on the helping to push legislation so that developers better inform residents, or the city informs residents, or residents get in front of the city in regards to what is being built. It immediately took me back to my time in the city of Atlanta with the MPUs, and the requirement that all developers in those specific neighborhoods, or maybe within the proximity, whatever you were building or whatever you were trying to build, you had to go back to the neighborhood and present in front of the neighborhood so that the residents could know, ask their questions, and you could have your information or your sheet at the time signed off on to say that you did go to inform the residents. And then you would go to the if there was any issues, then they would take it up with the zoning board and so forth. So it immediately took me back there, and I was just like, okay, well, maybe we do need to try to work on legislation to push if Stonecrest Citizens, if our organization is going to be or can be the hub for things of that nature, then maybe we can have it to where the those developers come to us as we're continuing to grow and host these town halls and these conversations, so that residents can hear what is taking place around them. That's my comment.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Dana. And that's awesome. I seem to remember that there was a community in College Park that it was not only a sign off to say you did it to move forward in the application, but that particular community group had worked it to the point where if their concerns were significant, they could actually halt the forward progress of the application.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Andrew, I am putting in chat a page about the DeKalb County Community Councils.
Okay.
Which are somewhat similar to the NPUs. They were part of the DeKalb County ordinances that Stonecrest adopted, but they were quietly taken out at the very start of the city and not instituted for us.
Okay.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Okay, good. So this will be probably informative and sort of a cautionary tale as well. I also saw, thank you very much for that, Dave, by the way. I also saw from Alex, two of the biggest takeaways that she had was get to know your neighbors. Yeah, that is a lost art. And delegate responsibilities. Yeah, we need to do that. Ms. Thibodeau, did you come off mute?
I did. Just wanted to say that great meeting. It was good to be here. I came to listen to Mr. Scott. I've known him for a while in the real estate world, and he really did bring some great information. I wanted to say that one of the things that I thought was a great takeaway that he said, he talked about the community knowing what you don't want, but he also talked about the community knowing what you do want. I think that if all you talk about is what you don't want, you sort of negate any progress. So it's important for the community to get together to know what they want, where they want it, so that when development does come, you can have a really good, intelligent conversation with that developer to determine if it's something that you to allow or not allow, and then also be willing to know enough about what you want so that if there are ways to compromise with some of the development, then perhaps you can put certain stipulations on what they do so that it does fit in with the plans that, with the comprehensive plan, and it does fit in with what the citizens want.
Yeah, and thank you for that, by the way, Stacy. And it's going to be important that we get really clear about who we are and what we want. There are some workings toward that, but nothing cohesive enough to meet the requirement you outlined. One of the things Mr. Scott talked about also was he talked about the conversation needs to be intergenerational. And so Stonecrest is changing. It has been one way for some time, but now our demographic mix is definitely getting younger. You can look at that in the census and see the median age has been going down. Not huge, but it's been gradual and noticeable. So now we've got, to his point, millennials, younger and elder. We've got Gen Z coming. And so we need to have like a intergenerational conversation about that to try to understand not just what we want, right? But what folks who might aspire to be here also want. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Alex is representing for the young Black people here. That's a mess. Thank you so much again, Stacy. Anyone else, comments, thoughts? Dave, thank you for dropping that that link in there. It's good stuff. I was just
hey man, I'm full of trivia. One thing that I was trying to understand something that Mr. Scott said, and it seemed like he was saying that the city center would be a collection of strip malls. Did I hear that right?
That is what he said.
That sounds awful to me, because one of the essential natures of strip malls is they are not walkable from one to another. And if you look at the current strip malls anywhere around the mall, there's nothing cohesive about them. There's no walkability except along the strip. And if you compare that to something like, this is my latest love, the square in Covington.
Yep.
And if you go there and look at the walkability, part of which is because all the parking is behind the buildings, or most of it is, not all of it. And if you took that, made it more modern, made it probably larger, call it 3- and 4-story buildings, around a central space where people can sit and meet and talk, but they can walk all around to different places, then I think you have something that will not just be a shopping city center and an eating city center, but the core of public discourse and meeting and a center of gravity.
No, that's excellent. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Yeah, I like that. Pam said, that's what I had in mind as a city center, a square with curb appeal and a sense of community. Yeah, I think we would want to modify said zoning to fit something like that. I love Covington. That's we go there for coffee as well as for Scoops ice cream over there. And
hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You go to single scoop, not double scoop? Come on, man.
When we're cheating, man, that's where we go. Yeah, man, that's where we go to that's where we go to cheat.
I only go to make sure I don't run into Robin while I'm getting ice cream.
Another square, if you guys just feel like getting on the road, in West Georgia, and unless you know, you just would never know. West Georgia, I think it's the city of Carrollton.
Huh.
If you go into Carrollton and visit their downtown, you'll see an actual art district based on a museum and an art school that someone brought there about 20 years ago. And then it is set up kind of like what you're talking about. And it's not that big, but you can walk, you can commune. All of the eateries are open air, and or at least they have, patio seating that kind of abuts the sidewalks and stuff. And there is some two-story stuff going on over there. So if you wanted to check something out that reminds you of Covington or something like that, downtown Carrollton would be another place to check out. Okay, I see, Stacey. You got to jump on. I got you. No problem. Thank you for being a part of the meeting. Malika, do we have any other business stuff that we need to do?
To say a couple of things. Like when I heard, to Dave's point, when I heard Mr. Scott talk about a series of strip malls, my mind said, well, that must be real estate lingo. That's just what you call when you're developing a land like that. But interestingly, I didn't automatically see strip mall when he said it. So when he said it, I saw the type of development that you're talking about, Dave, and I was like, I guess that's just what we call. That's just the base name for that type of commercial development. You call it a strip mall because it may or may not be attached, and it's commercials, not townhomes. But so that's what I did. So Alex says she kind of did the same thing. So I'm excited though to hear that other people are thinking that would be our city center. And as I continue to see things go up, like I'm not sure what Choate is building right now. I don't know if anyone knows what Choate is building next to
the Hyundai, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's an expanded facility for them. Includes car wash and more bays and stuff.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So yes, I think it's time to do something. We will talk about more about what we were talking about before in our next members only meeting. So now's the time to join the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition. We are definitely on the move. And right now, small and mighty, we don't intend to stay that way. Dave has said, he's looking forward to some volunteering. So we're going to move into this new portion of who we are. Our next, our members only meetings happen on the first Tuesdays of every month, with few exceptions. And then our engagement meetings happen on the second Tuesdays of the month, again, with few exceptions. So we look forward to folks reaching out to us, info@stonecrestcitizens.org or www.stonecrestcitizens.org. And I think we have Pam had her hand up.
Yep. Go for it, Pam.
The conversation about the car dealerships reminded me of a conversation I was having with one of my coworkers who happens to live in Gwinnett County and is doing similar work. And when I mentioned the current development on Mall Parkway, he wanted us to be mindful of the fact that right now car dealerships are expanding for storage of used cars because they are anticipating an influx of repossessions due to the economic downturn. And we may want to be mindful of that as we see building requests come from existing car dealerships or car dealerships that are attempting to come to Stonecrest to build a lot. So that's something to think about. And I don't know how that would impact us based on the conversation from the gentleman before, it sounds like a huge tax base, but do we want our community to be a parking lot for used cars?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something to think about. And I think as we get ramped up and get through some of the baseline establishment stuff that organizations need, these are the threads where we need to pick up and be intentional about driving the conversation about who we are, right? I mean, we've got to take it beyond the fussing, because as we're able to say who we are and actually compel our municipality, maybe even compel independent landowners to get on board, we may see some changes in that. You know, I had an interesting conversation with somebody a couple weeks ago. Well, no, it was last month. And they were talking about, you know, their business and their employees, and their business is centered around weekend events, and they happen to be here in Stonecrest. And he said, you know, what's interesting, Andrew, is he said, we don't know what to tell our employees to tell people about Stonecrest. He said, we don't even really know where to tell them to go or what's fun to do. Like, you know, we don't even know how to do that. You know what I'm saying? And so we don't even have that narrative. Now, part of that is on them as the business owner, but shouldn't we also, as the residents and the community members, be driving that conversation? It should be, and the city, it should be really clear, if you're here, what you can partake of. I mean, we've got beautiful national preserves in a mountain, right? We got river, it needs to be cleaned up, but we got one. And so, you know, it shouldn't be that employers don't know how to inform employees or to inform their customers, right, about how you can participate in our community. So there it is. But excellent comment, everyone. Pam, thank you so much.
Just to make sure, is everyone aware that about the IDI warehouse proposal for 2 million square feet, over 1,000 truck trips a day? And also Duke Realty has come back and they have applied again for the same thing that they abandoned after we resisted last year on the lower part of Lithonia Industrial.
Didn't they promise to have a study or something like that? They were going to do the research and come back.
Maybe they did. I don't know, but I just saw it on the zoning calendar.
Okay.
And it's the same parcels. Yeah.
Okay.
Pisses me off, frankly.
We're about to wrap up, but that, guys, make sure you get apprised on what's on the calendar, including that IDI development. I do remember that from last year. Alex says, I just want to know why there are 2 Chapel Beauties supplies less than 2 miles apart. Meanwhile, some smaller businesses are signing contracts that they cannot open another business within 3-mile radius. I will try to mind my business on that. Mind their business on that. Go ask them what the heck is going on with that. One of the things we talked about in the Stonecrest Citizens Coalition that we wanted to do, or that we aspire to do, is to have a group that will talk to businesses about what they're doing and why, and how they intend to participate with citizens. So that is something we're absolutely working on, because it's a valid question, and they may have a good answer. I don't know. But we definitely aspire to have that kind of questioning go forward. Just to be mindful, everybody's time is 8:26. Welcome back, Mr. Scott.
Andrew, on what you just said, I think it's even more important to be in dialogue with the mall owners and with the owners of the strip malls around the mall area, both to find out what their plans are and to let them know how they can make money doing things that we want them to do, because they're only here to make money. There are 2 Chapel Beauty Supplies because he thinks he can make enough money, and the people mean, Chapel thinks that, and the people renting to him think that they can get the rent from him and make the most money that way. If we could convince them of something else, they very well might go along, even if they are big, non-local, soulless corporations. That makes it harder. But as far as I know, there is no organization, and the city is not trying to even coordinate amongst the 5, 6, 8 owners of those various commercial areas, say between the mall, hotels, and Walmart.
Yep. Absolutely. Dana, we're gonna let you take us home unless Malika has something else for us before we depart. Dana, last question, comment to you.
Okay, we are in the process, SCC members, we are in the process of planning and organizing for our meet and greet. So if anyone has any recommendations for a hosting place, or you would like to open up your beautiful home, your beautiful clean home, then please reach out to us via email, or maybe shoot myself a text, or call. So yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Dana. Looking for alternatives to Panera, but we thank the Lord for Panera. All right, Malika, do you have anything before we shut down?
I don't have anything. Mr. Scott, our meetings tend to be about 90 minutes. We try to keep them to about 90 minutes. So I was very excited to see you come back on. But I was like, oh, we're wrapping up. So we did have some great engagement, some great conversation. You will be able to see that, because this was a recorded call. It will be posted on our YouTube page. And so we'll make sure that we get that link to you so that can see what else we talked about while you had to step away from us. So thank you everyone again. For community members who will be watching this later, reach out to us with your questions and comments, and consider joining. We're excited that Mr. Scott said he's going to be joining the SCC. This is how we grow. This is how we create for ourselves the community that we want to live in. Dave, Pam, Alex, Dana, appreciate you being on, and we look forward to connecting again soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Not everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.